Good morning and welcome to Veterans Heartbeat on the Pulse of the Veteran, where we discuss issues of health, happiness, opportunity, and well-being of interest to the veteran community, their families, and the community who honors them.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of Veterans Heartbeat, brought to you by River, the Rural Institute for Veterans Education and Research. My name is Jason Zencraft. My co-host Ed Lasofsky is here with me, and he is the Executive Director of River. We welcome you to a weekly wide-ranging discussion of issues, events, opportunities, and needs in our veteran community. Morning, Ed. How you doing?
Morning, Jason.
We'd also like to thank our sponsor, Farside Signs. They create amazing-looking vehicle graphics that will drive traffic to your business. They are located at 1526 South Avenue West in Missoula. Follow them on the web, Instagram, and Facebook, or just stop on by.
Good morning. This morning we have Darren Selnick, who is a senior advisor for Concerned Veterans of America. He's worked directly with Secretary Shulkin at the VA, and he works within this Concerned Veterans of America directly with the White House, affecting policy for veterans. So we're excited to have him on this morning. Good morning, Darren.
Well, good morning, Ed. Thanks for having me on your show. Appreciate it.
Well, you've got quite the background. Do you want to give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. Retired Air Force officer. Got involved with the veterans organizations over 20 years ago. And since that time, served in the Bush administration as a special assistant to 3 secretaries. Then I was a commissioner on the Commission on Care. I was also senior advisor to Concerned Veterans of America. And then I went into the Trump administration from day one as first senior advisor to the secretary. And then I was recruited by the White House to be the Veteran Affairs Advisor for the President in the Domestic Policy Council. And then I left last March simply because I promised my wife I wouldn't continue to visit her only once a month.
Happy wife, happy life, right?
That's it.
So you've worked directly with President Trump?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So is he as scary as everybody talks about in the media?
No. I mean, I was nervous to go to the White House at first simply because of all the stories myself. But once I got there and General Kelly got there, I found out that it was General Kelly made it, anyone who's in the military would recognize it, a very smooth operation, lots of fluidity and flexibility, which I think is good because it's a fast-changing world. But a lot of order, a lot of process, no chaos. And my meeting that I had with the President on veterans issues one time was very professional, very insightful. He asked a lot of interesting, insightful questions, really interested in the subject. And I would say the President has spent the most effort from any president that I've known about on the veterans and military issue, and it is a top priority for him.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Last year, he got legislation through that made it easier to fire federal employees. Is that correct?
Correct. At the VA, all career employees, if you're doing a bad job, if you have a firing offense, the legislation made it easier to go ahead and fire those employees.
So define a firing offense, if you don't mind.
Well, you just can't fire someone because you don't like them. You just can't fire someone because they won't right political. You actually have to have done things to be fired. So, for example, when a doctor in a hospital is watching porn in front of patients, that's kind of a firing offense.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a real-life situation.
No, I know the situation. I know the case. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. Fraudulent wait times, those sorts of things. But you have to do due process. You have to document this stuff. You don't want real whistleblowers fired. You don't want that to happen. So there's a process to document and make sure that employee is the whole list of offenses and the whole list of courses of action. You want to make sure the course of action is for the offense. And so, that's why I go through a review process to make sure what the employee did was severe enough to justify being fired. And if it is, now you have very limited appeals and sort of that thing. In the old days, an employee could game it out either by just declaring themselves a EEOC complaint, saying they're being harassed because of age, sex, or something like that, or they could appeal it so many times it would take literally years and people would just give up. Now it's really well-defined. There's a well-defined process. There's the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection that investigates these things, and we can swiftly move really bad employees who need to be fired through the process and get them out.
Now, that was a great win for the veterans.
Yes.
But he didn't stop there, did he?
No, he actually, the president has 10 campaign promises, and he's determined to get them all filled, and he's been checking the box off. One of the biggest ones was establishing more choice for veterans in their health care decisions and making that a great decision, as the president would say, between wanting to have great VA facilities and great community care. And so the most recent Mission Act, which the president will be signing soon, does a lot of these fixes and increases choice for veterans in their community care.
Well, let's get ground level here in Missoula, okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We have the highest suicide rate in Missoula,
mm-hmm.
and it's in Montana. We have the highest suicide rate per capita in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been doing a lot of research. One of the issues is veterans with chronic pain. 53% of those that completed suicide had chronic pain.
Yes.
Our closest pain clinic within the VA system is in Denver, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2 days on a bus with somebody in pain.
Correct.
I have been trying to get the VA. We also have a community clinic, outreach clinic.
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to get referrals from the VA, and they prefer to send people to Denver.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I mean, frankly, the VA system, as it's grown up, is the only socialized health care in the country. That's a fact. Government, it's the only benefit that has government employees. And so in order to keep its money and its staff, it has, in the past, it has tried to limit outside its four walls to all veterans in order to keep its money and its staff. That's how socialized health care works, and that's the importance of CVA's commitment and the President's commitment in terms of veterans being able to pick their own choice between either the VA facilities or the community care. The new Mission Act, once implemented over the next year, will change all that.
So when does it take effect?
So it was just passed last week. There's a one-year transition period where the old 40-30 standards go away, 40 miles, 30 days, and the VA has 120 days to develop draft access standards. These access standards will be similar to the DOD's access standards for its healthcare system. And so the situation you described will go away, and it will go away for a particular reason. There will be real specific designated standards for drive time, wait point time, whether it's urgent care, routine care, wellness, specialty care. And so this access standard will be developed. It will have to go through White House approval. Congress will be part of that. And once it's done, it'll be just like the TRICARE system, where it'll be published. So if, for example, the standard was, a 60-minute drive for a specialty, okay, then if VA doesn't have a facility that's 60 minutes away, the veteran automatically can pick in the community. Automatic. The VA cannot stop it. There will be a verification, obviously, as any healthcare system has, but that's the key and beauty to these access standards. Once these access standards are developed, each one is an automatic choice mechanism for the veteran. If the VA can't meet that access standard versus wait time or drive time and a host of other standards, then the veteran automatically can pull the choice trigger themselves and go in the community.
That's been one of our biggest complaints about choice is we know the veteran. We've seen this game played out several times. You know, they'll make an appointment within 30 days with the veteran, cancel it, and then redo another 30 days, and they say that don't count. And then getting a referral to a specialty or even non-specialty general practice just doesn't happen for these guys.
Yeah, they're very good at gaming the system. So I know that the team I used to work with is hiring a whole new top-level management from the private sector and whatnot to help reform the system. So there's a big culture change that has to happen, and part of that is no matter how perfect any system is, if you have bad actors that want to game it, they can be very successful in that. And so it's changing the culture and it's hiring some talent from the outside to go ahead and put in the mechanisms so the systems can't be gamed. And so when I was at the White House, we were very cognizant of that, and so we really wanted to make sure the legislation had those oversight mechanisms, but we also wanted to make sure that we brought in over at the VA the talent with the outside expertise and expertise from DOD who knew how to set this up and would set it up faithfully as both Congress and the President wanted this done.
So I've got about 200 veterans that I know right now that need pain control mechanisms. You know, the opiate crisis problem.
Yep, I sure do.
At the Institute, we're getting calls pretty much on a daily basis saying, hey, they've cut off my meds and I'm ready to kill myself. And right now, we can't get them to a specialty care doctor. We just got to kind of sit back and wait.
Yep.
Is there anything that we can do until this gets implemented?
Well, yeah, you get this to the attention of the senior management. I mean, one overlooked mechanism that cuts through some of this, if your local VA management's not responsive, is going to the White House hotline. I mean, those hotline calls are answered, and those are directed to be fast-tracked for those special problems. The senior staff over there at the VA, once they get word of this, will definitely do something. But the key thing is getting the word to them. But that's one of the reasons why the President wanted the hotline, so that trained people can take these problems and get them cut through the bureaucracy and get these things addressed quickly.
What's your number one recommendation to every veteran that's listening to this broadcast today?
Well, it depends what their situation is. But with healthcare, I would like to say that there is hope, and the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So if you're not getting the healthcare that you want, use the available mechanisms. That could be a veteran service organization, your local post. That could be, certainly you want to go up the chain at the VA if they're not giving you what you want. Use the hotline, and use your congressman. Now, hopefully, in a year, you won't need to use those mechanisms because we'll have the things in place at the VA where it should be smooth sailing. I'm a retired veteran myself. I am Air Force retired. I use the TRICARE Prime system. I've never had these issues using the system because these things have been worked out. We're trying to get VA in a place in a year where it's the same thing, where it should be normal operations, that you shouldn't have to call a congressman, you shouldn't have to call a hotline. You should automatically get what you need, using these standards.
Well, we've got two really good congressional people here in Montana. For those listening, Mike Waters with Greg Giaforte's office, and Denny Lenore over at Steen Daines' office has been very receptive to helping veterans in need. So I will say that's a good thing. All right. So there's got to be a lot of little loopholes in all of this legislation. There usually is. So where are the gotchas for the veterans on this?
Well, we carefully worked with Senator Moran's office to eliminate every possible loophole in this. So that's why we're carefully watching the mechanisms, the development of the access standards, the phasing out of the old choice, and the other mechanisms such as prompt payment. We've really put in a whole lot of fixes in here. But the loophole is the bureaucracy, when they make their rules and everything, like to make rules that fits their agenda, not the intent of legislation. So that's what we have to be very careful is when they make their rules and their procedures, and they do those sorts of things, that they actually follow the intent. And that's why with CVA, we're going to put up a clock and we're going to start the countdown on this thing, and we're going to be watching the implementation very carefully to make sure all the fixes and all the congressional oversight and all the rules and processes and procedures are implemented as intended. Because if they are, you've got a pretty system that 99% of the time is going to start working the way you want to. If they don't get you an appointment when they're supposed to, there'll be an appeals process, and there'll be for example, you'll have a couple opportunities to go ahead and do a couple walk-in to clinics, and then pay a copay. Quality standards, if VA is meeting quality. So we've put together a whole menu of options with this legislation to try to make it as fail-safe as possible. So to take your example, if they're trying to game the system, you have a couple of free walk-ins that you can do in the private sector. You don't need approvals for. So those are the things that we're trying to. But watchdogging it is going to be the key.
So let's talk about watchdogging it.
Mm-hmm.
It's called a codified federal rule, correct?
Yeah, which has to go through, be published in the Federal Register. They have to do a notice. It has to go through OMB first. Mm-hmm.
But does the public out there have any input to that process?
Yeah, there's an open comment period. So they have a couple ways. They have the open comment period, but also even before it goes to rulemaking, things like the access standards will first be drafted in 120 days and sent to Congress. So, it'll be transparent, and so certainly one quick, efficient way is if you think those draft access standards don't look good, don't make sense. For example, if it was, 150 miles or something like that, something crazy like that, trust me, it's not going to get through the White House like that. But let's say some bizarre standard was out there. You have the ability to go to your member of Congress and say, hey, complain very, very loudly to them and say, hey, this is an unfair access standard. I know at CVA what we're going to be looking at is there are already proven access standards that work for every veteran, the DOD access standards for the TRICARE system. And so if it already works well for the DOD, why shouldn't VA just adopt the same access standards? Same veterans, same type of facilities should have the same access standards.
I don't disagree at all. So how do they get a hold of this before it becomes a rule that they can, and I know that our congressional delegates are open to input, so how do they get a hold of the proposal?
Yeah, so at the 120-day mark, they have to send it to Congress, the draft. That's way before it's going to be proposed as a rule. It won't go into the rule stage until 270 days when they have to then deliver to Congress the final version of what they want, and then it goes, and then those access standards have to go into the rulemaking process and then be published and be completed before the 1 year is up. So they'll have 2 bites at the apple. First, the 120 days, which, that's going to be transparent. That's going to be, the public will be able to look at that. Every congressman will be able to look at that. And then after they take the input from the draft in 120 days, then at the 270-day mark, they'll see what the final version is, and if they don't like the final version, they have ability before it goes into as it starts the rulemaking process to hit them up as well.
So veterans, beware, if you want something, you better be looking out for it, is what you're saying.
If you want to have input, we've made sure there's mechanisms for it, and yes, veterans should be very vocal.
So this is exciting times for the veterans. I mean, they finally get an input into their health care.
Absolutely, and actually have some real choice, which we fought hard and long to make sure the legislation had it.
Well, you guys at CVA have worked hard on this, and I know the president has, so that's great. But let's talk about another issue that we see a lot of, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Best research facilities, bar none, is within the VA system.
Okay.
Nobody can really argue that.
Mm-hmm.
However, getting it from research into practice, a lot of times there's a big disconnect.
Yes.
You want to talk about that?
Oh, absolutely. The head of research, Rachel Ramoni, is relatively new. She comes from the private sector. She's been there a year and a half, and I've had that exact same discussion with her. She's really good, and she's been in the process of saying, it's what I call engineering this research. You know, what is the practical application for veterans, and how do we get that done? And she's been in the process of doing private sector partnerships to do exactly that. And so I'm very hopeful in that in terms of getting the research out from underneath it being buried in the org chart and doing those public-private partnerships. VA has a strategic partnership office, and Rachel has the right attitude and comes from the private sector and sees the ability. My conversations with her, and she's always been on board with this, you know, VA always talks about these great advancements that they've done for veterans, but they're always like 40, 50 years old. I said it's time to stop looking at the 40, 50-year-old advancements and start time to have them today. What is the practical things that you can do with this stuff? So, yeah, very, very hopeful on that front.
Well, let me give you an example, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows about post-traumatic stress.
Yes.
We picked up on a study that the VA put out.
Mm-hmm.
It puts a vestibular disorder as comorbid with PTSD. And Jason, you want to explain it better?
So basically, in 2016, December of 2016 to be more specific, the VA conducted this study Ed's referring to, and out of this group of veterans with PTSD, 81% also had symptoms of a vestibular disorder. So a lot of people say, well, what's a vestibular disorder? Basically, it's damage to the inner ear causing balance issues. So they may experience vertigo, nausea, loss of balance, which makes sense. However, the side effects of anger, depression, and anxiety usually get misdiagnosed as PTSD. While they might have PTSD as well, the VA is really not diving into could it be a vestibular disorder and, could it be TBI as much as we'd like. And this is not a knock on necessarily the VA or the doctors themselves. We realize that doctors these days with the current medical system are really shortened to the amount of time that they can spend with a patient, and they're urged by many of the facilities to push that pharmaceutical intervention rather than a more natural one. So that's one area that we really started to dive into is vestibular disorders and traumatic brain injury.
But the problem became when, quote unquote, the standard of care for the VA does not include this. So even though we invested over $100,000 into the equipment for TBI and vestibular, they won't refer over to us because it's not the standard of care.
Yes. Yeah, that is one of the cultural changes that needs to happen now. I know Rachel's been partnering in terms of this, making these things applicable to organizations like Cohen Bioscience, who's doing a lot of research. The Marcus Institute on TBI, funded by Bernie Marcus, is doing a lot of this sort of stuff, and they experience the same frustration. A lot of their veteran patients come to them because the VA won't go forward with these sorts of things. And so the public-private partnership is important, but you're once again describing the old culture that the VA is in the process of trying to change, which is narrow protocols, keep it in-house, refer as minimum as possible to the outside, especially service-connected combat items, because that's supposed to be the VA specialty, and so a lot of VA staff feel that if they refer out or let the private sector handle those sorts of injuries and health issues, then why do they need the VA?
We're running out of time here, so I'm going to let you have the last word.
So what I'd like to say is that lots has been done, but lots more needs to happen. And so our focus at CVA is one, being supportive of getting in Mr. Wilkie to be the next the VA secretary, because we need a new VA secretary. But implementation of the Mission Act is going to be key. And us, in partnership with veterans around the country and our own field staff that in Montana, we're going to want to be hearing from veterans and working with veterans to make sure the Mission Act is implemented on time, on budget, and smooth, so that the veterans can get the health care they deserve, that they've earned, and be in control of their health care decisions.
Well, it's been a really good show this morning. It went quickly.
It sure did.
Thank you very much for your time, Darren.
Thank you so much, Ed and Jason.
So thank you very much for listening to Veterans Heartbeat. We'd not be able to bring it to you without all the support of the listeners. And thank you again to Farside Signs for sponsoring the show. If you do need a unique vehicle design, swing on by and check them out. Also, thank you to our main sponsor, River. River has an array of services such as veterans-focused education, a vestibular disorder clinic, and now non-pharmaceutical treatments for pain, anxiety, and depression. Check them out on Facebook or on the web at riverofchange.org. Lastly, we'd like to show our appreciation to all of our veterans. Thank you for serving our country and keeping it safe.